President Trump's legal team is feuding with the Mueller investigation over the terms of a possible interview with the president. Last night on Hannity, Rudy Giuliani said the aggressiveness of the Mueller team would backfire on them.
Where's the sense of justice on the part of Mueller, on the part of the Justice Department? People who hate Trump were put into primary positions of power. That has completely tainted this investigation. The real story here is not that this case isn't going to fizzle. It's going to blow up on them.
Alan Dershowitz is a retired Harvard Law School professor and the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. And he joins us. Professor, is this interview with the president going to happen, and should it happen?
It won't happen. I think what's going to happen is Giuliani will make Mueller an offer he can't accept, to paraphrase The Godfather. And that way, Trump will be able to say, look, I wanted to testify, but it was Mueller who turned down a reasonable request by our attorney. Look, no lawyer would ever allow a client to testify under these circumstances. All they have to do is ask him one question. Did you know about the meeting in the Trump Tower with your son? If he answers that question truthfully, that he didn't know if that, in fact, is the truth, he could still be charged with perjury, lying to a government official, because we have Michael Cohen, who says he did know. And you never allow your client to say something that could be contradicted by another witness, because the prosecution can choose to believe that other witness.
If you had President Trump as a client, though, he's a very gregarious guy who is quite happy to sit down and talk and chit-chat to anybody, and thinks that as long as he's just like straightforward and says what he thinks, everything will be fine. Often, from a lawyer's point of view, that's the worst kind of client to have, isn't it?
Yes, and I would certainly, I'm not his lawyer, obviously, but I would advise him to speak to the public on television, say what he wants to say, write his tweets, although I don't think he helps himself by some of his tweets. But under no circumstances put yourself in a position where you can be charged with perjury or lying to a federal official. And if he doesn't believe me, he should make two phone calls, one to Martha Stewart, who went to jail because of what she said to prosecutors, and the other to Bill Clinton, who was impeached because of what he said in an interview under oath. And so I think every responsible lawyer would say to him, you should not either testify or be interviewed. Look, I once gave him advice on television. I said, I have 4 pieces of advice. Don't fire, don't pardon, don't tweet, and don't testify. I
want to ask you about Rudy's other point, which is the hyper-partisan nature of what's been happening. And with reference to this Bruce Orr guy in the Justice Department and his 60 contacts, at least, with Christopher Steele, the MI6 agent who was basically the dirty tricks operative for the Democrat Party. You know as well as I do that impartiality is the essence of justice. A county court judge can't have a bunch of communications with the plaintiff and not with the defendant. That's a big no-no. How come Bruce Orr at the Department of Justice doesn't know you can't talk to one political party continuously through the height of a campaign?
Of course, there's a difference between a judge and a prosecutor. Prosecutors are allowed to talk to people. Also, I don't believe that Mueller and his team care about whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win. They're not partisan in that sense. I think they are zealous, some would say overzealous prosecutors. Because he's special counsel, he has a target on the back of the president and others. If this case were handled by ordinary U.S. attorneys and they came back after a year or 2 years without indicting anybody, it wouldn't be a story. Nobody would know. But when a special counsel is given a target and he fails to indict, he's been a failure. And that's why I'm so strongly opposed to special counsel, except in the most extraordinary circumstances, which weren't met in this case.
You're absolutely right about that, Professor, in terms of the special counsel's office. I hope we get rid of them. Thanks a lot.
And joining us exclusively now with reaction is Jay Sekulow, an attorney for President Trump's legal team. Jay, thanks for being with us tonight.
Hey, Laura.
So where are we now on this exactly? You gave your response. You're waiting for a response. How long do you anticipate the response taking from Mueller's team?
Well, look, I don't give dates. This is an investigation that at its outset has been corrupt. There's no question about that. It continues every single day. There seems to be a new revelation. So I'm not going to give a date. I think it needs to end very soon. And it needs to end very soon because the nature of what's taking place here is irregular, and that's being kind. And when I say irregular, look at how this started. It starts with the dossier from a foreign spy, basically, Christopher Steele. He was an intelligence officer for Great Britain. He puts together this dossier on behalf of who? Fusion GPS and the DNC. Okay. Another interesting fact, and now we're getting a lot more information on that, the number 4 at the Justice Department, Bruce Orr's wife, is working for Fusion GPS with Christopher Steele, putting together this dossier. That's how this investigation commenced. So as you know in the law, there's the doctrine of the fruit of the poisonous tree, and I think that anything going forward here has to keep all of that in context and in mind before we agree to do anything. And right now, the fact is, and I've said this, and Rudy said it, and other lawyers that have commented have said it, if you lined up 100 lawyers, there's 100 lawyers that are going to say don't sit for an interview. And there's a reason for that. Not just the perjury issue, but the fact that you would ask questions potentially of the president regarding Article 2 powers. I mean, you're a constitutional lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
The answer to that is no.
Yeah, they want more information, more documents. That would be a big, big fight. Daniel Goldman, a former assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District, commented on the concern that he says your team has about putting the president under questioning. Let's watch.
They're absolutely right to be concerned that if the president were to go into an interview with incredibly well-prepared prosecutors who have not just the president's tweets and his own statements, but, as Rudy Giuliani correctly pointed out, millions of documents, testimony from dozens of witnesses, they know the backstory much better than any of us sitting here know it. And when they questioned Donald Trump, he would lie within the first 30 seconds.
That's being repeated.
Can I respond to Daniel Goldman's statement?
Today.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. Where do you think that the special counsel received the millions of documents and the witness interviews? It's because this president, unlike others, has decided that he would be completely transparent in the process.
Yeah, but Jay, you don't know everything they have. You don't know everything they have.
Of course not.
Obviously.
Of course not.
And that's one of the pitfalls. I mean, I wouldn't put my client in this position to walk into a perjury trap with obstruction of justice. But why would you even give them a narrow opening on obstruction? Is it because, as some lawyers are saying, they'll say no? Because they're not going to want to be limited in their questioning on the obstruction angle, whatever perverse angle they have.
Look, Laura, I've said this. I've been saying this for a year. I'll say it again. My thoughts and my view of the Constitution is they don't have the right to ask any of these questions. And I think that's supported not only by case law in the D.C. Circuit, but also by the structure of the Constitution itself. So I can assure you this tonight. This legal team is not walking this president into a perjury trap. Not going to happen. If there's any type of interview, whether it's written or otherwise, it will be the appropriate type of response. We're not letting the president walk into a perjury trap. This investigation from its outset, who would allow that in light of everything that's transpired and continues to transpire? So I'm not going to disclose the content. As you understand, I'm not going to disclose what we told the special counsel. But needless to say, we didn't accept their offer.
Do you think it's possible to get a fair 2 hours of questioning, knowing what you know now, with the new revelations about the makeup of the Justice Department, Bruce Orr, the new revelations about Christopher Steele? Do you think you could get 2 or 3 hours of reasonable but tough questions from the special counsel?
Here's my response to that. I'm not inclined to believe at this point, in the nature and scope of where this investigation is, that there's such a thing as a fair shake. Now, that's not to say that something couldn't be arranged, but I will tell you this. My inclination, and I'm speaking here as a lawyer to the president, I'm also speaking for our legal team. We'll go back to the perjury trap. It is not going to happen. Thus, the question is, could they structure a series of questions that the president should answer under Article 2 of the Constitution? And I think the hurdle on that is very high for them, and they haven't established it at this point.
Have you already briefed this for your legal team? Emmett Flood and the guys in the White House. Has this already been briefed in the event that this does go to court?
Laura, you've known me for a long time. I don't just deal with a plan A and a plan B, and I'm one that practices before the Supreme Court. So the issue which you're pointing to is if there was an issuance of a subpoena, which is a serious question, and I do not think the Justice Department has the authority in this case and would authorize it, because Bob Mueller is not an independent counsel. He can't do that himself. Are we ready to go to court if we had to? You bet. Do I think we're going to have to? I don't think so. If we do, we'll do it. I mean, look, you got to protect not just this president, but the presidency. That's what's at stake here. The idea that, could you imagine every U.S. attorney that had an issue with the president of the United States could issue a subpoena for that president to testify? Now, the founders knew that wouldn't work, and that's why they structured 3 branches of government and separation of powers.
Hey, Jay, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We
Thanks,
really
Laura.
appreciate it.
The reality is, the real story here is not that this case isn't going to fizzle. It's going to blow up on them. The real question is what we talked about before. There's a lot more to what they did that nobody knows about yet.
I know some of it.
A lot more to the obstruction of justice, to the collusion, to the fake dossier.
Oh, I know a lot.
Trying to bring Steele back in after he was completely discredited.
And then feed it to Mueller.
Yeah. And Mueller is going to have a lot to answer for.
President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, last night right here on this program, describing how Mueller's case is, quote, going to blow up in the special counsel's face. Somebody's been saying that for a little while. The host of CRTV's Levin TV, right here, Sunday night, 10 Eastern, the #1 show on Sunday night on cable news. It's the great one, Mark Levin. Let me let you pick up from here, but you also have been saying things that I've been paying very close attention to. The Constitution of the United States is on the president's side. The president ought not be speaking to the people that are running this witch hunt. Take it from there.
First of all, Robert Mueller is a greater threat to this republic and the Constitution than anything Vladimir Putin did during the campaign. And I'm no fan of Vladimir Putin. He's threatening to take down a president of the United States. Now, let's walk through this quickly. The president is not a witness to any crime. How do we know that? Because we don't know what crime they're even talking about. So he doesn't need to be questioned as a witness. President did not commit a crime. What crime did he commit? So he's not a target. He doesn't need to be questioned about that. According to the Department of Justice, a president can't be indicted. A president cannot be questioned by a subordinate like Mr. Mueller about his prerogatives as president, that is, the firing of a subordinate like Mr. Comey. So what questions exactly does Mr. Mueller have? I'm talking to you, Mr. Mueller. Exactly what questions that you have where you seek to turn this country upside down and disenfranchise the over 60 million people who voted for this president of the United States? You are a plaything of the media. You are a plaything of the Democrats. You're a plaything of people within the Obama administration who sought from day one to take this president down. Now, the president of the United States is not an ordinary citizen. He must protect the Constitution. He has to protect the office of the presidency. He has to protect the president's prerogatives. He has to protect separation of powers. That's what this president is doing against this rogue prosecutor. It is Trump who has the white hat. It is Mueller who has the black hat. And the president's lawyers, should this go to court, are going to have a fantastic opportunity to expose Mr. Mueller, to question Mr. Mueller, to question where does he have his constitutional power under the Appointments Clause, to question him about whether he thinks a president can be indicted even though the Department of Justice says no, to question him to explain why, despite public report about the FBI, the CIA, the FISA report, the dossier, Hillary Clinton's association with Russians, we have Russians everywhere, but not with Trump. They're with Hillary Clinton, they're with Fusion GPS, they're with Mr.
Bruce
Orr, with the Justice Department.
No, this is important. Stay on that. They are everywhere. Russian lies sold to FISA court judges, a fraud committed on the court, not once, Mark, 4 times. Lies spread purposely to the American people. That sounds like the former Soviet Union, Mark Levin.
So the question is, if Mr. Mueller is such a great prosecutor, why is he blind as a bat to all this that's taking place in this country? You want to pursue Russia, Mr. Mueller? I can find you a first-year law student who can show you what to pursue. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen of the court, the president wasn't a witness to a crime. He wasn't surrounded by Russians. The president didn't commit a crime. The president cannot be indicted. So, as I keep saying on this program, Mr. Mueller, you can leave the room and don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. We'll see you in court. And if they go to court, then it is an opportunity for the president's lawyers to expose exactly what's going on here.
What should they do? This is important. Focus on that.
Well, I think what they should do is not only ask the court to explain what authority Mr. Mueller has to do what he's doing, given the ridiculous appointment that he received that is so broad it's preposterous. And if you can indict a sitting president, you better have a damn good reason to want to sit down with him and question him. These questions, if they're to be asked at all, have to be very, very narrow. I wouldn't sit down with him and answer any question. The fact of the matter is there is no obstruction of justice. He wasn't a witness to a crime. He didn't commit a crime. He can't be indicted. Mr. Mueller can't question him about presidential prerogatives. So what the hell is the point of this whole thing other than to set him up for impeachment because the Democrats and the media want to remove a president who was elected by over 60 million people to disenfranchise all of us? What's the point of this other than that?
That's why we call you the Great One. Mark Levin, thanks for being with us. Don't forget, Life, Liberty, Levin, every Sunday night, 10 Eastern, #1 show on cable that night. Don't miss it.